Basil, are you excited to learn how to make pierogies? Do you make the best pierogies?
Hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen. So far, Dan and John have taught you how to make 2 delicious treats, and I am going to teach you how to make a 3rd Pittsburgh staple, the illustrious and very popular pierogi. Now, I know it's super easy to go to the grocery store and pick up a box of Mrs. T's, but I wanted to take the time to walk through with you how to make them from scratch. Now, this is not an easy undertaking, and if you're like me and you're not super great at making pierogies, this might take you probably a couple hours. What I will tell you though is I have some coworkers that live in Poland, and they have assured me that the recipe that I'm showing you is legit. I hope you've enjoyed OTPgh so far and that you've learned a couple things from our morning sessions. I also hope that you stick around for our afternoon session since we're going to have a couple really good talks. Now with that, I am going to show you exactly how to make pierogies. And I have a couple pointers also along the way of things that I learned to add to your recipe, of course, once I was finished filming this. So with that, let's get started.
First things first, what do you need? I divided this up between the filling and the dough. So for the filling, you obviously need some potatoes, 4 is fine, a little bit of olive oil, about half of a chopped onion, a handful of cheddar cheese, and a half a cup of milk. For the dough, on the other hand, you need 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 large egg, and 1 cup of hot water. First things first, grab yourself some potatoes. Now peel those potatoes. And finally, chop them up. Because I'm lazy, I decided to use my food processor. And if you don't have one, you can just chop them up into 1-inch cubes. Now get a big pot and fill it up with some water. Throw a little bit of salt in while you're at it. We want to put our potatoes directly into the pot and boil them. When the potatoes are ready, you can stick a fork through them, and that is how you know you'll be able to mash them later on. Put on your lid and let these babies boil for a while. Now let's go back to chopping. Next, take your onion and let's chop this up. We're going to fry those onions up, so grab a pan, throw in some oil, and throw your onions in. Let them go. Let them golden brown on their own on a low heat. Let's get started on the dough. So take your flour and you're going to mix in your 1 teaspoon of salt. Make sure to mix it in really good so the salt is throughout the flour. We don't want salty patches within our dough. Now it's time to mix in the eggs. So make yourself a little teeny well and put the egg directly in the middle of that well. Now, you want to start mixing your dough and getting that egg throughout the dough so that you have a nice sticky consistency. Once you start mixing, you're going to have to add in a little bit of water at a time in order to make the dough rough. You can see me doing this now, and eventually it gets to the point where I need to start using my hands in order to knead the dough. Don't be afraid to use all of the water. You can always add in a bit more flour if it becomes too sticky. Once the dough is at its desired consistency, just put a tea towel over top of it and set it aside for now. We want the dough to rest for about 15 minutes before moving on to the next step of rolling and cutting. This is where the fun begins. Take your dough ball and cut it into quarters. Now begin rolling that out. You want the pierogies to be thin, but not too thin. Continue to roll them out until you're happy with your desired thickness, because the next step is to cut them out. I didn't have a cookie cutter on hand, so I decided to use this Helltown beer glass instead in order for me to make my perfect circles. Repeat this message with the remainder chunks of dough until you have the amount of pierogies that you are interested in eating. And voila, here we are, our perfect pierogi doughs. Now let's get back to making our filling. Time to make the filling. Now, because again, I am lazy, I decided to use my KitchenAid in order to beat the potatoes. So I put in the rest of my cheese, a little bit of milk, and as a point of note, some people recommend actually putting cream cheese into your mixture. There's nothing wrong with this. And in fact, I wish I would have done that prior to actually making the pierogies. So if you are doing this, consider putting cream cheese in while you are beating your mashed potatoes. Now the fun part. As you can see, I have my filling in front of me and I have 2 of my pierogi shells. The first thing that you're supposed to do is put a little bit of water around the edges. This will help the 2 sides of the pierogi stick together so that none of your filling will come out. Next, take your filling and put a little dollop on of your filling within the middle of the pierogi. Next, take one side of your dough and press it onto the other and really pinch those sides in. Now take your fork and press down the sides of the pierogi. This will definitely ensure that your filling doesn't come out when you begin to boil them. Now look at that, 2 perfect pierogies. Don't they look like they just came out of a Mrs. T box? But think about it, you just put your whole heart and soul into these pierogies. They're going to taste so much better. Now next you need a pot filled with boiling water. This is how you cook the pierogies. You place them in one by one very gently because you just put so much time into these lovely creations. Once these pierogies rise to the top, they'll be ready to eat. Look how beautiful and perfect these pierogies are. You just put your blood, sweat, and tears literally into making these perfect little dumplings because it's taken you all day. A friend of mine told me that his grandmother would take an entire Saturday in order to make pierogies. Why stop there? Throw them into a heated pan and fry them up. That way your pierogi has that little bit of delicious crisp. Voila! Plate your pierogies and get ready to eat. Make sure to put those caramelized onions on top and a little dollop of sour cream on the side, and you are ready to go. Thanks everybody for coming to my pierogi demo, and I hope that you can make them at home yourself.